So when we talk about legacy planning, what we're talking about is a level of caregiving and estate planning that has to do with both the time in which we are here and then when we're no longer alive. And we'll begin with a couple of photographs of individuals who you may have seen before, may recognize, and may not. The gentleman on the left actually asked this question, and it was, what wisdom would you try to impart to the world if you knew it was your last chance? He happened to be, his name is Randy Pausch, and he was a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and unfortunately was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at the age of 45. As a result, he had a relatively short time to really plan for anything, especially with young children. So he delivered his last lecture, and it was, in his case, much more germane. The last lecture series is one that is conducted at Carnegie Mellon, but his happened to be pretty germane because he died shortly afterwards, after a long fight with cancer. But some of the things that he was able to do included being somewhat thoughtful about this idea of, how you spend your time, because his time was limited and he knew that. And also he had some other quotes that are all part of a book, and I think a film was made as well that you could look into. One of the things that he is noted for is having said that this whole business of the last lecture was in some ways a head fake. In other words, he had young children, and while he did this in the context of the last lecture, part of what he was trying to do was to leave information behind for his children whom he would never see when they became adults. On the other hand, there was another famous person who died fairly recently, and his name was James Gandolfini, and you will know him, of course, as Tony Soprano. However, in his case, death came quite unexpectedly at the age of 51. Because of a lack of any type of planning, only about 20% of his estate actually went to his wife, and our understanding is he paid over $30 million of his $70 million estate to taxes. In fact, this dark screen is all that was left after he passed away. The series ended, there was no finale, there was no plan for going forward. Data that we see from surveys indicates that for most of us, we don't do enough planning. In fact, Gallup shows that more than half of US adults today do not have a will. And of those who report having a will, there are many who have not had those wills updated for some period of time. So if we die without a will or a trust, essentially there's no direction for us to guide families. Family members may be in a situation where they may disagree with each other about how things should be handled. And the estate will go into what is called probate and divided into various components based on state law. Now, probate essentially means prove the will. So obviously, if there is not a will and it has to be probated, then the probate administrator will decide how things will be left. And of course, there's no final message left to family members. Now, this is particularly germane with what's going on today with COVID-19. We often think of sudden incapacity as something that might happen in an accident, but we know now that with this awful pandemic, that it could very well be something that occurs as a result of contracting this virus, and suddenly you're in a situation where you're isolated, or someone you love is isolated from their family, has no ability to communicate, and may very well not even be able to have their final wishes followed because of issues around being able to get at information. And oftentimes this leads us in a situation where there's no one to handle finances. So while estate planning tends to refer to dying, and therefore it becomes a great obstacle because people don't want to think about it, we recognize that it is really important to consider the implications of not doing any planning when we think about this problem. So in the case of no estate plan, heirs may be subjected to a number of obstacles, not only things like probating creditors or lawsuits, but also, the amount of effort and time it may take to be able to get at information that otherwise could have been prepared well in advance. So what we want to do here is talk about not the problems related to estate planning necessarily, for lack of estate planning. What we want to do is talk about a strategy that would not leave our families in that situation. And so we talk about the benefits of overall legacy planning, and those many of us have seen before: the ability to spell out our healthcare wishes, determine where our physical possessions may go, and avoid a lot of emotional strife over that, avoid any additional kind of unplanned legal expenses, and certainly providing for loved ones who would not otherwise be protected. But even in all of that estate planning, what is often missed are the intangible assets that we have within our lives. And those include what we would consider to be character assets, the things that you value, health, spirituality, heritage, the purpose of your life experiences, perhaps talents that you have and plans for giving, and intellectual assets. And these could be things like business systems or alliances, ideas, skills, traditions and reputation, and certainly your wisdom. So by definition, then, generational planning is a modern, intentional process that expands estate planning reach and helps you plan your legacy. So the first objective is passing on a family's tangible wealth and assets, which are all included in traditional planning. And then the second objective is conveying your family's values and history, its legacy, to the next generation. Both of these are done, obviously, for the next generation. A successful legacy plan will ensure that a spouse can live comfortably, the children are prepared for any inheritances, the grandchildren and future generations will understand about you, how you lived your life and what was important, and to a large extent as well, for most of us, will impact the world at large. So our goals during our lifetime are to have a steady lifetime income, provision for management of assets in the event of disabilities, provisions for healthcare wishes to be carried out, and plans for long-term care. Also during our life, we'll think about things like funding for family members' goals such as college, home purchases, business startups, achievement of all of our charitable objectives, and preparation of beneficiaries for inheritances, including passing on wisdom and values. And then after death, what we want to try to ensure is that there is a sufficient level of income for our survivors, that to the extent we can, we minimize taxation, that we have a very smooth transfer of assets, and that those assets transferred to family members follow our wishes as they've been laid out during our lifetime. And then this leads to continued management of inherited assets, continued support to favorite charities, and of course, avoidance of family strife. So to do this, we feel that there's a process that we can follow. We call it a 6-step legacy plan, and we might think about it as our way of leaving our mark on the next generation. Part 1 is, of course, planning for the potential of incapacity. And we could do this in 2 important ways. There are 2 documents that are extremely important. One is called our Advance Directive for Healthcare. It essentially outlines what our wishes are in the event that the unthinkable were to happen. And this includes whether or not we wish to have life extended and in what circumstances. And a power of attorney for finances. Such a durable power of attorney would come into place in the event that we are not ourselves able to handle our financial affairs. Someone else can step in. The second part, it's one I really like, is getting organized. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek because it is a challenge for me. It doesn't come easy. But for the real business of estate planning, we have to be prepared. And this means doing things like identifying property and how it will be distributed, determining whether or not our particular situation, our estate, so to speak, will be subject to estate taxes. And then to some extent, making it a little bit easier. It's never easy, of course, but a little bit easier for our families in the event that they have to then get into our books and records and try to figure out where things are. So this includes ways to give them access to important information, including things like having passwords available, and for them to know what to do with respect to all kinds of things that we may not think about, including things like where our mail goes, what happens to our pets, etc. And it allows us to provide special instructions and explanations for any of the decisions we wish to make. The third part of our process is to think about the people we love and the causes that we care about, and to consider contingencies and special circumstances. So we don't really know in what order spouses will predecease each other. So thinking about that and having contingencies for either spouse potentially dying before the other, being able to divide assets according to need or equally depending upon our wishes, and then considering other relatives in the event that our own family is either directly taken care of or doesn't really have to be taken care of. What about others in our family? And in some cases, of course, there will be special situations in which something like a special needs child or a special needs adult, may need to be taken care of with a special type of document. Now, we think it would be helpful in many cases to work with an advisor and to put a lot of this information that we're talking about in writing. And so on that level, we can do things like legal documents such as trusts and estate plans, a level of coordination among various financial advisors, including attorneys, tax professionals, financial advisors, and so forth. Because a will isn't the only way to transfer assets. In fact, there are some more efficient ways to do so, and certainly some that would be able to avoid probate. The fifth part is creating what we call your family legacy, and this will include things like writing down memories, putting together information in photo books and scrapbooks, maybe compiling recipes, maybe teaching someone a special skill that you have, whether it's something like woodworking or gardening or painting or illustrating. And then finally, monitoring your plan, because things change over time. People's marital conditions change. You yourself may change your mind about something that you thought you might want to do at one point in your life, and then at some point later, for whatever reason, you may change your mind. And if you don't update your will, if you don't update your estate plan, it's possible that the wrong people will inherit money. And this has to do with everything from current spouses being disinherited because former spouses are left with money, or children from an earlier marriage are disinherited because we don't think about them in terms of a second marriage. All of these kinds of things are the things that we would want to consider. And what we recommend is that we work with you to develop a plan. And what's important in any plan is not only establishing the goals themselves, but also having timeframes. So what we'd like to do is suggest that you consider the aspects that we spoke about in this part of the presentation, and make sure that you sign a healthcare directive, that you complete a power of attorney for financial assistance with financial decisions, that you do have somewhere a list of accounts and passwords, that it's secure and that people know how to get to it, and that you gather all of your important papers and keep them well organized. And what I would say lastly is that what we want to do in this regard is to ensure that if our legacy is set, that we have a situation where a trusted person is ready to step in and help with your wishes, to help carry out your desires, to help with the organization and the follow through of those documents. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is shift over to a different screen so that I can share with you a piece of software that we have been utilizing and make available to our clients to help with this important topic of legacy planning. The software itself, the program is called Everplans. And what I just did was I got a dual factor authentication because, as I'll talk about in a moment, we want to be very careful with the information we put in any systems nowadays, especially as we live in this virtual world where so much of what we do, almost everything we do, has to be done virtually. And so I just put in my second code. I signed into the program and then was given a dual factor authentication on my cell phone so that even if someone had somehow or other secured my password information, they still couldn't get into my software because they didn't have that second code that was only on my cell phone. They would have had to have my cell phone as well. I talked about this a little bit on the cybersecurity webinar that we did last week. So let me now take this particular software and get it up on the screen for you. Do that here. I'm going to share that screen with you. It's still dinging away as if I still need it, but I do actually have it. So I will share this screen. And in so doing, we will expand this. And so what you will see, this is essentially what's called a dashboard. And I created a dashboard for myself to be able to show you the kinds of things that are available in Everplans. Now, when you sign on to Everplans, initially it will ask you a series of questions which will help to set up your dashboard. My dashboard is unique to me because there are certain information that I wanted to be sure would be here. And there was other questions that I was asked that really weren't relevant. And so those things don't really appear on my dashboard. When you go through that process in setting up your Everplans, you will be customizing your dashboard for your situation. And so on the first part of on the left side, you see a series of topics, if you will, that include the various areas where there can be information. And right on my dashboard, there are things like a place to put my will and my life insurance policy information, as well as any personal information that I may want to make sure is here, including digital and other types of financial information. Now, I'll jump into a few of these just to show you what it looks like. So if I go into the account information, the financial account information, what it allows me to do is to say, okay, I can put certain information here. And that information can either be very specific. For example, I could put in account numbers or just some details about the account without the account numbers. So in this world we live in today, where there is so much concern about cybersecurity, it's really left up to you as to how much information you want to be in the system. Now, we know that this particular software has among the highest level of cybersecurity protection that you will find, the type of protection that is used for things like HIPAA documents and other types of government information. Nonetheless, we have no guarantees that these systems cannot in some way be entered into illicitly, perhaps hacked, either by someone who's working in the dark web or maybe even someone at a government agency for some foreign government. So what we do here is really up to us in terms of what we're comfortable with. But what I really like about this is that we could put in key information, and even if we don't actually put the account numbers in, it would just tell someone else who is looking after this information when we're incapacitated where to find that information. So it could even be just something that we put in or something that we upload as a PDF. So it could be information about our accounts, credit cards, and loans. This is important because in the event that we were to become incapacitated, someone who is looking after our financial affairs might need to know what credit card payments to be looking for, or what loan payments have to be made, and also who to contact in the area of perhaps advisors or agents, things like life insurance agents and financial advisors and accountants and so forth. And then if the unthinkable were to happen, where is the life insurance policy? Some life insurance policies we have today have been set in such a way that they not only create a death benefit, but they have a living benefit, perhaps one that might be able to be used for things like applying towards long-term care needs. So knowing about where that life insurance information is extremely important if that were to happen in the case of, say, incapacitation for an extended period of time. And of course, you can upload other information, prior tax returns, Social Security information. The list is very long. And then I think there are some very good articles that you'll find that may help you with some decisions. Some are things like this, things that we never think to budget for, home maintenance possibilities, things that, are not regular expenses, gifts. We all have happy occasions in our lives where family members will go through a graduation or a special, if you will, birthday level, a certain birthday, or there might be weddings or other types of religious events that we want to give gifts for, and then things like pets and so forth. So just some good articles just to get us thinking about things we might want to think about, including how to talk about matters such as talking about finances with family. This can be a very difficult topic for many people, and I think there are some good articles that you'll find as well in the Everplans software to help you with some of that planning that you may wish to make. An important area of this software is something called deputies. Deputies are individuals who you essentially assign to be able to have access to certain elements of your financial information, personal information, and other information that you may store in Everplans. It's important to think about having deputies, people that can step in, and recognize that not only can you choose a deputy, but you can also provide specific direction for that deputy as to what they're to do and limit the access that they would have unless there were a specific event to occur. So it really has been thought through in a very comprehensive way. It's one of the things we really like about the Everplans software. And we think that you will find as you begin to use it that there will be some additional ways that you may want to customize it for your personal situation. So that would be another thing to really consider in using Everplans as well. I think there's a really good piece of information that exists here, but I think it's in the wrong place personally. It's in the After I'm Gone section, and it allows for something called the letter to family and friends. I think it's in the wrong place because it's a place to put a free-form narrative about our life story, something that we might want to convey. And the reason I think it's in the wrong place is because where I really think it should be, and I'm actually talking to the company about trying to move it, is to have a place right here at the very beginning of Everplans that would include my story. Because I think it's really important to tell our story, to develop our story, and to be able to share it. I certainly would like to know for all of my clients what your story is. Things that really are important to you, what shaped your life, whether it's life experiences that you had as a child or maybe as an adult, maybe stories and information that you receive from others. It might have been part of your formal education, or it might have been part of other educational processes that you went through. But I would love to have that information if you would share it with me, and certainly think that others in your family would love to have that as well. So I'm pushing hard to get my story added here. But the point is that it really could be anywhere that you decide to write that information down. Another thing to keep in mind is that in any case where you have information that can be stored in Everplans, you have a couple of choices. One thing that you could do is to put information in very specifically, such as driver's licenses, social security number, etc. And there you may not want to necessarily put in the driver's license number or all the digits. You might just want to put the expiration date. And then what Everplans can do is remind you when your driver's license, for example, is coming up for renewal. There are maybe other documents that you actually might want to have embedded in Everplans. And the cool thing is that you don't necessarily have to put all the information in. You could use this feature which says select file to upload, and essentially just upload a PDF, an image of the document that's stored on your computer. So I think they've thought through within the software some many ways to help us to make this process I'll say yes, close here, to make this process of following through on our legacy planning a little bit more straightforward. And I know from speaking to some of my clients who have begun to use Everplans that they're finding it to be, you know, very, very useful, a very valuable tool, one that's helping them to get motivated to do some of the things that we're talking about here, and in helping them most specifically in getting organized. Even the most organized of all of us do have different places where we have information stored. And I think what Everplans can help to do is to consolidate that information into a single place and make it a lot easier for those who may look after it in the need to look after it in the future. So I'll stop my screen share there. I'll pause for a moment and I'll take a look at our chat area just to see if anyone has any questions. And if you do, you can kind of add them there, and I'll wait a few minutes. And if you don't, then I will thank you for having spent the time with me today. I'll just remind you that we are continuing this webinar series throughout the month of April. We have topics for each week that we would like to cover with you. We think they're timely. We think they're important topics, and they're information that at this time when so many of us are isolated, we can't really move around, we can't really travel, it might be a good time to take care of some of these things that we've put off and free up, as I like to say, some bandwidth within our brains, because we won't be worried about not having documented this information, not having stored it somewhere where others can find it. So with that, I will sign off and hope that you had a good experience in getting this information, and most importantly, that I hope that you will find this information to be helpful. And if you need any further information, please let me know. I know there is one question that has come up, and it has to do with a durable power of attorney for finances. That is something that you can get on the web. If you work with an attorney, though, they would customize that for you. But yes, these are documents that you could use an online service for to do a durable power of attorney. And for those who may be wondering how you can get access to Everplans, I want to let you know that we will make Everplans accessible to anyone who's interested. So if you would like to learn more about it, you don't currently have access, please let us know. We don't want to, force you to use it, of course. It's entirely up to you to utilize it. But if you decide that you'd like to, we'd be very happy to create access for you and even upload documents for you if they're documents we have. And then lastly, keep in mind that you can deputize us for certain information if that would be helpful in your family situation. So given that we have a great deal of your information stored already, given that we have a great deal of information that you've shared with us, either in working with other professionals or working directly with us, keep in mind that you can deputize us for some elements of your plan as well, and we would be happy to help in that if that were ever to be the case that you needed us.